entrepreneurship is different from investing. People put it in this one big category, business, and people put entrepreneurship in one big category, entrepreneurship. But I could own a laundromat, or
Yep.
I could start a space exploration company. Like there's different types of entrepreneurship. And private equity investing, there's also different kinds. Like I could invest in a company at 6 times earnings,
Yep.
and and no one else is willing to invest. So I get a good deal, of course, because I'm investing for investors, but I also want to help and build the company. Or there's private equity where, and like in many kind of hedge funds and venture capital funds, you have to be careful if you're an investor. There's the kind of private equity where you invest and then you mark up the value of your investment, and then you go raise fund two before this investment.
Oh
The great thing
man.
about private equity is you don't return the money to investors for like 10 to 15
Were
years.
you sitting in the boardroom that I was in back in 2017?
I've sat in a lot of those boardrooms, and the private equity investors. I saw one deal. The private equity investor marked it up 500% after they restructured the company
Oh yeah.
because they just gave themselves all these warrants. Then they went out and raised $600 million for fund number two. Their first fund was like 150 million.
Yep.
So they raised 600 million based on the performance. And then the day after they raised that money, the company they had marked up declared bankruptcy. The day after. Like it wasn't even like a month after where they could say, oh, we had no idea. The day after they raised the money and their pitch book said, oh, we're up 500% in this investment, which it's just marked to imagination. Like it wasn't really up, but it was in the way they mathematically modeled it.
But
And
I mean, as you said, though, right, there's different types of private equity as there's different types of everything, right? And I've been involved in both, right? And so you've got some that are more, let's say, focused on the intention behind what an investor has put money into, to achieve. Sometimes that's obviously impact as well as it is the financial growth. But I've also been on the side of the table where, a PE firm has 4 partners. They're getting $1 million each a year just to have a management fee. They're not that worried about the carry of any of their deals. They then go raise fund two. And, there's all this deployment of capital back into businesses, which actually isn't really serving the investors who have come in the first place. So I've seen both sides of that coin.
no,
So,
it's insane. And to be honest, I've been an entrepreneur and I've also been a private equity investor and a VC investor. And I really dislike investing just because it's boring. Like all I'm not talking about stock market investing, which is also a different kind of game.
yeah.
But and I call it a game because I don't mean it in a bad way. All these things are games where there's rules and you want to win the game, and there's competition. And so with venture capital investing, all day long, people are coming into the office and they have a chart which says, oh, we're at 0 in revenue now, but once we sell to 1 out of 10 people in China, we're going to have $1 trillion in revenue. So there's like always a half smiley face going to the moon, and you have to decide whether it's true or not, and you invest, and it's so boring. Whereas entrepreneurship is and you use the word impact before, but I don't like separating out entrepreneurship from impact entrepreneurship. I think it's all the same. I think the word, and sorry if I'm going off on what seems like a tangent, but I'll bring it back. I think
It's
the word
okay.
capitalism is a very bad word because most people don't know this. It was a word that was invented by Karl Marx. It was in the Communist Manifesto, whatever the real name of that book was. And he basically distinguished between the people who are the workers and the people whose only goal is to accumulate capital, and he called that capitalism. And I think our society is not or shouldn't be a capitalist society. It's really an innovationist society. So the people who are rewarded the most are coming up with innovations, and they have the skill to have the idea that's innovative. They have the skill to execute on it. They have the skill to market it. They have the skill to monetize it. And that's how society grows. And so every good entrepreneur is an impact entrepreneur.
I was going to say,
Amazon was an impact business.
do you think that's a better definition of entrepreneurship, the way you just described it?
Absolutely. Because even if I was going to buy, so let's say there's two main types of entrepreneurship. There's the kind where 9 out of 10 businesses fail. Like if I wanted to make my own rocket company to explore space, maybe I have a 1% chance of succeeding. Or if I see the busiest laundromat on the busiest corner in New York City and I buy it because the owner is about to die and he wants to sell and retire to Florida, I buy it for 3 times EBITDA, and then I have some ideas. I'll serve drinks, I'll make it into a disco at night. or a nightclub, whatever. Disco feels like an old word, but
I'm an old guy, mate. I still use the word disco.
But I'm still, in each case, I'm trying to solve, like, that has 100% chance or an 80% chance of success. It's not true that most entrepreneurs fail. Most entrepreneurs are the laundromat owners of the world. And
it's so funny. It's almost as if, right? Like, again, like you've read my bloody book or listened to my podcast, because that's all I do these days. I go and buy businesses like that because I'm a bit old school. I like to buy good, profitable businesses that are, under leveraged or undervalued, depending on how you describe that, right? For whatever reason, someone's had it for a period of time and they've done what they can with it, or they've lost the impetus to continue. And I just invest everything I do into that. That's all I do. And it's kind of a private equity play, but it's not.
No, I like that. And how personally involved? Oh, this is the other thing about private equity investing. So I'm curious of your thing.
Sure.
Like, a lot of private equity investors say they get involved in the business and they help improve it. And I like that aspect of private equity. Just for me personally, I didn't, when I was doing that and I was serving on a lot of boards of companies, I didn't enjoy it, because usually if I saw a problem, the CEO wouldn't agree with me. And sometimes I was right, sometimes I was wrong, and I would listen to the CEO and so on. But there's one time I was really right. I said to the CEO, "You have 6 months of money left." And he's like, "Oh, don't worry. We're going to raise money in 3 months." And I said, "No, you don't understand. You're already out of business. It's too late. 6 months is the minimum time to raise money from the point where you're at. By the time a check is actually sent to you, people are going to see you have 2 weeks left. You're not going to get the terms you think you're going to get." So I had to call all the board together, convince each one of them, and against the CEO's will, we put the company up for business. He made 12. We sold it the day he was going to not make payroll. To the day, I was accurate. This is the most accurate I've ever been. To the day, I was accurate. He was not going to make payroll. That day, he sold the business. He made $12 million, and he hates me for it. Like,
he hates you for it.
And I didn't even have.
You saved the business, though, didn't you?
I didn't really have that much invested in this either.
But you saved the business then by that insight. I mean, because he would have kept going and he would have had nothing. I mean, that happens a lot, right? I've been involved in many of those.
He would have had nothing, and he hates my guts right now.
Well, he's going to have to send you a Christmas card or something like that.
I've seen that happen once. A friend of mine helped sell businesses in 1999, and the next day, somebody who made someone who had put in $50,000 and made $1 million sent my friend literally a gift wrapped Porsche that was parked outside of his house when he woke up in the morning.
Well, that might be you one day.
I've helped a lot of people make a lot of money. I have yet to receive one thank you.
So to your question before, I wasn't the MBA spreadsheet jockey. Like, I wasn't that guy. I was the operational guy that went into businesses, often as interim or CEO, to do the turnaround. So private equity firms would bring me in when they'd had an investment go underwater, and they'd say, "Nick, we want you to get it back, firstly, to what we bought it for, if that's possible," right? Sometimes it was a long way gone, and then stick around, bring back or rebuild the management team to then take it to the next stage. So I was that guy. I was in the weeds of a lot of dealing with people, problems, process, product, all that sort of stuff. And I quite enjoyed it because I was kind of in there fixing problems. But after a while,
I think that's a good path too, because you only become a better investor if you know how to be a good operator. Because then it's not about numbers. It's about a lot more subtle things than just, oh, our EBITDA went up last year. You don't know what that means. That means a lot of different things. Like, the best private equity investors, like take Henry Kravis, who's the second K of KKR.
Yep.
And
he retired, didn't he, today? Something like that. Didn't I read something today about was that today?
Oh no, that's
it was something I thought today. Well, something happened today. It could have been recently, but anyway, no, he's like one of the most famous sort of PE M&A guys around.
Yeah, he invested in a company I started a long time ago. He lost his money on it, but yeah, they retired. He retired. It's funny. I haven't said his name. Oh, that's so funny,
because I thought I saw it today. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't said his name out loud in like 15 years, and like, yeah, you're right. He's in the news today. But his as soon as he joined Kohlberg's company, Kohlberg is the first K, Jerome Kohlberg. He Henry Kravis' first thing, for a year and a half, he went to Connecticut in some crappy little company that was going under, and he turned it around. And that's how you learn to be a good private equity investor.
Wow. So for context of anyone listening to this, by the way, we've just kind of gone straight into a fun conversation, which I love, by the way. But James is sitting there saying, doesn't like investing. He's been a successful investor and had hedge funds and all sorts of stuff. Just again, people may not know who you are. So it's quite refreshing and colorful for you to go straight into it in this way. But what, can I just ask the question though? When you said you don't like, I may have got this not 100% right, you don't like investing, or there's some different nuances around investing. What do you mean by that?
Well, okay, I should take it back a little bit. I don't like being involved in the company anymore.
Okay.
Like the fact that I had to put so much, like that one company I mentioned, I had to put so much work in just to help this guy who was kicking and screaming every step of the way. That's not a, I spent 6 months of my life, or maybe even longer, doing that. That's not a fun way to spend time. Like you only live once. That's 6 months where, maybe like on average an hour a day, but some days like 5 hours, some days nothing. But I had to put a lot of work in, and you have to put a lot more work into companies that aren't doing well. And so I decided that's not for me. So I switched my strategy of private investing,
Yeah.
which is I only invest if someone smarter than me is investing at the exact same terms as me. So if I'm investing and Peter Thiel or Sequoia Capital is also investing at the same terms as me, I never have to think of that company again. And if it goes out of business, too bad. Peter Thiel, who's much smarter than me, was wrong. But fortunately, I only did a small amount and blah, blah, blah. Or because all these great, smart people are in with all their connections and operational experience and so on, I just have to sit back and do nothing. And I know the second, my strategy really is the second the CEO calls me, that's when I know that I go to my spreadsheet where I predict all my outcomes and I put 0. The second the CEO needs my help, yeah, it's a 0.
But they might think that you're an educated, experienced professional guy who's
Call
had
Peter
20
Thiel
companies.
Call the founder of PayPal and the first investor in Facebook.
Oh,
I'm just using him as an example. Call the guy who's smarter than me. That's my whole idea. I'll give the same thing works in the stock market, and it works really well in the stock market. Warren Buffett files a filing with the SEC every 3 months about all the new companies he's invested in. He's required by law to do that. Any hedge fund with more than $100 million is required by law to do that. But very few people know this. It's called a 13F filing. And I look at the 13F filings. Oh, I see. Warren Buffett I'm making this up, but Warren Buffett just invested in IBM when IBM was 100, but now there's a slump and IBM's at 70. Oh, I'm going to invest. It's like Warren Buffett is my intern and I'm investing at a discount to where he is. And it's not like, people have all sorts of opinions. I'm trying to avoid opinions. It's not like I'm going to run into Warren Buffett at a cocktail party and say, Warren, how could you invest? Are you stupid? How could you have invested in IBM at 100? You're an idiot. No, I'm never going to say that. I'm going to say he made a good investment at 100, so I get to piggyback him at 70. This strategy is an amazing strategy for stock market investing. So I apply the same thinking for private equity investing. But all that means is really, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to get involved. There are other things I'm interested in. I'm not really interested in quote unquote IBM or whatever company. Sometimes once a year, I'll try to call up to see, hey, how are we doing? Because I get nervous. But other than that, I don't want to talk to the CEO. I just want to trust that it's all in good hands. And then I can focus on the things I'm interested in. But also the other thing, you say you're still doing this, and it's interesting. I think it's a great, for people listening to this, I think it's a great strategy. It's an amazing strategy to buy small, profitable businesses and then figure out some umbrella to combine them in, like some vertical or horizontal where you're capturing part of the space, because then your multiple of what the value is over earnings goes up. You get more deals on buying your materials and things like that. It's a brilliant way to invest. And this is a failure of mine, but this is in the past year. I tried to buy some online education mobile apps. So like each on flippa.com, you could buy online businesses that are profitable.
Yep.
And I was buying a collection of online learning apps, and I figured I would combine them and make kind of a general, university of mobile apps. And I was involved in other activities, and it was just too much work for me. And I bought one of the businesses and I just really didn't follow up on it. And I guess it's still going on, but
so why was it a failure? Just because you haven't finished the journey with this yet?
Well, it was over a year ago and I really just dropped the ball.
Okay.
I was trying to another business simultaneously, and I was also involved in some other activities, and it took more time than I expected, and it required an expertise I thought I had, but I didn't really have.
Okay,
And
I understand.
so I guess I could have gotten people to help me, but that also would have required a lot of time and work. And so I lost some money. I bought one of the apps and I just never did anything with it. And I had a deal to buy another app that I backed out of because I realized that I was in over my head, and it just didn't work out. But I
Okay.
regret it because it was a good idea. Like, online learning is really a good thing. And I saw kind of a coherent thread through different mobile apps that I felt I could combine them into one general sort of, university of mobile apps. And so it
Most
was
of
a
my
good
career
idea.
in private equity was in education technology and online learning. So the last business that we sold when I left private equity was a business called Ascend Learning. We sold it from Providence Private Equity to Blackstone for 14 times EBITDA. It was about 2.3 billion, but that was 14 businesses rolled up to create
Yeah.
a bigger education play.
I
Um,
think so. I
that's
think
good fun.
and no one has really done that in the mobile space. Like, people have done that in I mean, it's mobile because all of these online sites have mobile apps, but these were purely mobile apps I was buying. There was no site associated with them, and so it's a good idea. And online education, I mean, we saw during the pandemic,
Yeah,
online
absolutely.
education is everything now. Like, I learned so much more from even just YouTube videos than I ever did from my teachers in school.
So can I ask, like, when I was preparing to have this conversation with you, right, I was finding it hard to sort of, and don't take this the wrong way, kind of put you in a box, right?
What?
Don't
God damn it.
don't throw a mic at my head. I'm thinking you've got like a lot of different things that you've done, right? And you've got a lot of interests, and just to catch up with that is quite fascinating, just by this conversation we've just
Sure.
had. But how do you decide what you focus on?
Well, what do you love doing?
Is that it? Simple as that.
Simple as that. Like, and you have to try a lot of things to know what you love doing. But
Yeah,
like,
okay.
what did you love doing when you were a teenager, other than girls and
I
stuff?
still do it. I mean, I started playing basketball when I was 6 years of age, and I now still play for my local team. Like, so I'm passionate about that. I've never
Right.
given that up in any way.
Right.
So
Right. So if you wanted to monetize that, let's just brainstorm.
yeah,
Okay, you
cool.
could create a fantasy sports basketball league. You can make a prediction market about basketball. You could do all the what's it called? The cyber what's it called? The
Well, the
where
e
you
games.
cybernetics.
Oh,
The
okay, yeah, yeah,
you take the online data and use it to predict who they should buy, which players they should trade, which players they should
yeah.
get, what plays they should call, what positions they should put people in, or you could use it for betting or whatever. That's a really exciting area. Like, I personally like that area. You could be a blogger, like, or you could stream you watching basketball and commenting on it. So you could have, and there's Twitch streamers making $1 million a year commenting on sports games. So we could just riff all day on ways I know, like, I'm interested in chess. I know chess players who are not the best chess players in the world. They're like, they're great chess players, but they're not, famous for being in the world championship category, but they're making over $1 million a year streaming, lessons and streaming themselves playing, and so on.
Really, just from there, just because it's their perspective on what they're experiencing, and people are
Well,
interested in that. I mean,
yeah, well, like with
my daughter.
everything.
I mean, my daughter, for example, just to jump in, she's
Yeah.
obsessed with. She's 9, and I've got a 6-year-old as well. They love watching YouTube of kids playing like Roblox or Minecraft.
Yeah. Well, the one of the kids who started playing those, like, this was like 10 years ago or 8 years ago. There
Yeah.
was a kid who was like 8 years old who was making 20 million a year from just like opening up games and playing them for the first time, and kids watching them. But I watch chess players play on Twitch all the time, every single day. I just was watching some this morning. So on the plane ride here, I was watching on my phone, um a guy analyzing one of his games and then playing, and it's fascinating. I love it. And that
Wow.
guy makes $1.5 million a year.
Yeah. So and this is the thing, right? You've got more opportunities. We talked about entrepreneurship when we started this conversation, right? We said actually, there's probably more ability now for entrepreneurs to make a bigger change in the world than anything else, and actually probably more so than governments and things like that,
Oh
right?
yeah, governments are useless. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying this as a bitter libertarian or whatever, although I probably am more aligned with that than anything, but I'm not in any party. But I don't even think about governments and change, because they're not. Governments will look at all the change around you. This mic was made by an entrepreneur, not by a government. This Zoom was made by, I believe he's an ex Chinese Communist Party member who moved to the US and his family's still in China. Zoom is made, by an entrepreneur. Like the government never called him up and said, listen, can you really make a way for us to have conferences online? The government didn't do that, and he didn't get any money from the government. He just did this. Now, you could argue, well, the government funded, the Department of Defense funded the internet in the 1960s. Okay, that's true. But a guy in Switzerland at a nuclear research facility is the one who made the web, Tim Berners-Lee.
Mhm.
So, and a student at University of Illinois, Mark Andreessen, made the modern concept of the browser that we're using. So, it's the innovationists who create the world, not the government. And
Right.
again, I'm not saying this like, oh,
No, I'm not political
Medicare
either, right?
sucks. Like, I'm not saying any of that.
I'm just seeing a shift, right? So what you're seeing now is some of the biggest problems in the world are being tackled, if you like, or at least being sort of thought through by entrepreneurs who are brave enough to go there, right? And being those are the ones who are being more creative necessarily come. So for me, it's not a political thing. It's just, entrepreneurship has the ability to change the world. You could argue that it always has, but I would say that right now, with the access that we have to different things, technologies, the fact that we have, everything's like that whole sort of local to global and all that sort of thing means that we have more opportunity than ever.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I remember, a lot of people think if you make money and you're an entrepreneur, you've done something illegal in some way. And I once was in college. I was dating someone who was arguing with me, like to the point of like, I think she threw something at me that you have to do something illegal to make money. And it's just not true. And yes, there are people who are doing illegal things who make money. Like Bernie Madoff made money for many years, and I believe he just died in jail. And that's a miserable way to live. But most entrepreneurs are not like that. Most entrepreneurs solve problems effectively that many people have. The reason they make money is because many people have this problem, and good luck to them. Like I'll give you I just gave you an example of failure. I'll give you an example of so far success. So in 2017, I was having a miserable 2016. I was having a miserable time. I had recently gotten divorced. I had decided to throw away all of my belongings and live just in Airbnbs. I didn't want to leave any footprint of myself in the world. I wasn't renting. I wasn't owning. I only owned enough things that could fit in my carry-on bag. And so for a while, I stayed with a friend of mine, and we were watching on TV. This was mid 2016. It was one of the shootings. The police got a little too whatever, and they shot someone, and it was rioting happening. This was before George Floyd, obviously. It was in 2016. Yep. And we were just sitting around thinking, well, can we solve this problem? And we don't know anything about anything. And we remembered we had invested once in this guy who had made a weapon for the first Gulf War, which was a sonic gun. If you're standing, you could be 1,000 feet away, and I could shoot at you, and you will hear such a loud sound that you'll drop to the ground, probably unconscious. And the person sitting 1 foot from you won't even hear it. And so this inventor was a genius with that. So we called him up, and he said, no, I don't know how to do this at short range. And so he started coming up with another idea, and we raised money. And at this point, I was only peripherally involved, but I was involved in the initial discussions. He worked on a device that shoots a steel Kevlar cable. It shoots it out of the weapon and wraps around you and wraps you, and you can't move. And the more you fight, the tighter it gets, and it doesn't hurt you at all. So if you're within 21 feet, which is the law, you have to be within 21 feet. And if I say hands up, I'm a policeman, I say hands up, and you don't do it, I have no choice but to, right now, before this device was created, I have no choice but to either beat you up or shoot you or taser you, which people die from taser. And so we created this device. It's called the bowler wrap. And now hundreds or even thousands of police departments are starting to use it or are starting to test it. It became a public company. And every day we get calls like, oh, you saved another life today because someone got wrapped instead of tasered or whatever. So that's an example incredible where we solved a problem.
That's incredible. But
now I'll tell you the cynical side of this.
Yeah.
The question is that entrepreneurs have to ask, what problem did we solve? The problem we thought we were solving, of course, was fewer deaths. And that's a good problem to solve. But I suspect the reason sometimes, I think people do buy this for good intentions and good reasons because you do save lives, but also a lot of cities get sued by police for police malpractice. And you know, certainly if you're one of these cities, you are interested in lowering your costs of lawsuits. So that's another reason to buy this. But you know, then that's a good use too, because then that money can be put to get more teachers or healthcare workers or firemen or sanitation workers. You know, cities are hard to run, and if you have to spend so much time on lawsuits, then that's a bad thing. So it saves lives and it helps cities.
Yeah. So this is the thing, right? I think we could talk around this topic just in this conversation, but I'm curious to just talk a little bit more about kind of, you know, there's a question I've been pondering because you had a pretty interesting sort of transition from sort of, you know, not having a lot of cash to then creating some pretty successful businesses. I know you talk more about the failures that you've had than you do about the successes, but the question I've got for you is when you started writing the books, you've written 20 books, I believe.
Yeah,
Did you write
25.
them? Did you? 25 is it?
Not
Okay.
that I'm counting.
No, that's okay. Well, you know, I don't want to downplay it. But the question really is this: did you write them initially for you? You know, were they ways for you to kind of almost cathartic, like, you know, for you to kind of work through some of the things you were going through?
Yeah, I mean, look, I always wanted, probably more than anything else in the world, I always wanted to be a writer. Like in fifth grade, in second grade, I wrote my first play. It was horrible. In fifth grade, I was writing a book about all the people in my class and what girls and boys they liked. I was like a gossip columnist, and uh, and then you know when I was in graduate school for computer science, I just loved. I never took an English class in college or anything. I was a computer science major, but I just loved reading every novel I could find, like every well-written book, and I loved writing every single day. And uh, I just loved it. And so I was writing all the time. This is starting around 1990, and I couldn't get published. I wrote 4 novels. I wrote dozens and dozens of short stories. Nothing to get published, but that's the beginning of a journey. Like you have to fail at the beginning of a journey. And it wasn't until 2002 I finally had my first article published, and it was about finance. So I wrote a couple books about finance, but that to me was a little boring. And so I realized, why am I writing about finance? And all the time I've been starting businesses, making money, and then going broke. It was like a common theme. I would make millions of dollars. I would lose every penny of it a year or two later, and then I would start over. And I was miserable. People thought like, oh, you know, failure is the pathway to success. Failure sucks. Like maybe it's the pathway to success, maybe it's not. I wish sometimes I do have regrets. Like I wish I had not failed so many times in saving my money or building
Why
it
did
or
that
whatever.
happen, James? Why do you think you went through that sort of cycle? Like it feels like it was obviously repetitive from what you just said.
Yeah, it happened like 4 times. And the first time was the worst. Actually, the third time was the worst because I was going broke. I was losing a home. I was getting divorced, and I was outside reading a book, and it just started raining. And I'm like, what the hell is happening to me over and over again? I said to myself, I think I'm a smart guy. Like I make a lot of good decisions. I've built these businesses. Why is it happening to me again? And it's very depressing. Like I was pretty much, you know, I didn't know how I was going to get out of the depression. And you know, there are 3 skills to making money. There's making it, there's keeping it, there's growing it. And
Yeah.
so I was good at making it, but I couldn't keep it or grow it. And I kept thinking to myself, I'm getting older. Like I'm not going to do this forever. It's too much stress. And you know, why did it happen? Well, I don't know. I think you think you're good at one thing. Like I was good at building a business, and then you think you're good at that makes you good at everything. You know, as a kind of a bias, makes you think you're a genius at everything. So I would invest in these private companies without having, you know, the Warren Buffetts of the world in them. And I would then, you know, and I would invest more I would invest in bad companies. I would invest more than I should. And uh well, those 2 things basically.
You
And I
don't
had
think
no
you
one
don't think
helping
there
me.
was a you don't think there was a self-sabotage here, some sort of mental thing, some sort of pattern?
Yeah, I do think there was a self-sabotage, but I always try to figure out what is self-sabotage. Like nobody goes out and says, "Okay, I'm doing well. I need to destroy myself now." Like no one actually thinks that self-sabotage is this unconscious thing.
Yeah, it's an
So
unconscious thing.
I think part of the self-sabotage was I never thought I did well enough. Like I one time my first company, I made $15 million cash, and then I lost every penny of it. I because I didn't think 15 million was enough. It didn't somehow I don't know what I was thinking. I thought like everybody else was doing better than me. And so I
Mm,
needed to make more. And so when you think like this, you take bigger risks. You can't make $100 million from 15 without taking huge risks. So I would invest 2 million of the 15 into some shitty little company and it would disappear. It would just go away. And I didn't know how to invest. I didn't know, again, the biggest thing with investing is risk management. So I didn't know how to manage my risk because I thought I was a genius. And I had to learn like a lot of humility about what I don't know and stick to the things I do know. So we all know that investing is a path to wealth, but so that's fine. So invest, but once you know that, that's the 1% of what you need to know. The rest is 99% of it is reducing risk. And so I didn't understand that equation, that it was 1 to 99, that 1 is the reward, 99 is reducing risk. And I wasn't reducing risk at all. I was increasing risk because, oh, investors and entrepreneurs are risk takers. People don't realize
mm,
that the best entrepreneurs are risk mitigators. Jeff Bezos didn't start out making a rocket ship company. He started off selling online books. It was easy. So let's just make an online bookseller. And then he built up. Okay, now let's sell clothes and flowers. And then he built up. Well, let's let other people sell using our infrastructure. And then he scaled up. Well, let's rent out our entire infrastructure, our cloud system, so other entrepreneurs can use our cloud system for storage. And that's billions of profits now. And then he's like, okay, now I did that. Now I'll buy the Washington Post. Now I'll start a spaceship company because there's no risk for him now anymore. So
this is over, people have to appreciate this is over 20 years as well, right? When Amazon started off, as that book company, I remember like, a lot of people said back then it might not even last. Right? I was in the publishing game back then. I was in media. I was like, what's this Amazon thing, right? And then there's a couple of lessons there. One is the point of just sticking at it, right? And
yeah.
you use the term in your book, getting 1% better, not trying to throw the Hail Mary pass, right? Not trying to put everything under one thing that could work, because that's not a smart strategy. It could work, but chances are it's not going to.
No, chances are it's not. And that's just statistics.
Mm.
Everyone should understand that, yes, your natural talents and your genius will help you, but there's also then a big 50% luck in everything. Are you at the right place at the right time? Is the economy going to slump? That's the other thing too. I thought everything I invested in was going to flip in 6 months and I'd make millions of dollars. But
Yeah.
the reality is, the best businesses you invest in, they're in it for the long run. Like I'm in one investment now where the investment's doing well, but they don't want to IPO. They're doubling. I've been in this investment for 12 years. Like I invested my money in 2009, and I'm like, when are you guys going to IPO? And they're like, why should we IPO? We're doubling every year, but once we're a stock, we're probably not gonna double every year. Like the stock market goes up 10% a year. So they don't want to IPO, and I don't want to get my money out because they're doubling every year still. And I don't know, but you have to be patient and wait for the
Is that
best
why
investment
you
to come through.
is that why you said beforehand, again, when we were speaking about it, that now if you invest, you said you don't want to be thinking about too much. You want to kind of put your money in when there's someone in there who's got a better track record, or someone that you
Oh
think
yeah,
is
well
going
I'm in this one with Benchmark, so and
okay,
they're
right.
the first investors in eBay. So and I got lucky. I just knew someone who knew someone, and this is an Israeli company in cybersecurity, which is where cybersecurity is the best in the world, and they're in cloud stuff and all that. And yeah, someone from Benchmark, I just sort of ran into him, and I said, "Do you have room for just a little bit more money?" And he's like, "Sure." And so I went in with Benchmark, and then I actually convinced, what was it? The Rockefeller family VC fund. I forgot what it's called, maybe Gray Rock or something like that. And I convinced them to invest also. And so I'm in with a lot. I never have to be involved at all in the company. I'm in with a lot smarter people. But every now and then I wonder, like, hey, I got to make money before I die on this. So
Oh, well, listen, if you're in that sort of thing, someone's going to realize the value at some point. I mean, to the point around the sabotage comment, right? I had a pattern myself, right? Which was every time I tried to start a business, it didn't go very well. And then when I got employed and had, reasonably senior jobs, I'd get sacked. Right. So that was the pattern. So, and that happened repeatedly, like a lot, both things. So I'm jumping from both to both. And,
why were you getting fired?
because I had this disdain for authority, but more importantly, maybe I thought, if I'm being honest with you, maybe I thought I was smarter.
Yeah.
Whether that's true or not, right? I probably had that ego. thing happening back then.
Like, so you knew there was this pattern of you getting fired because probably you were being, smart and making suggestions, and the bosses perceived you as being arrogant or something. And so you knew that if you just switch this one habit, you would succeed at the job. But this is a self-sabotage. You chose not to do that because you almost wanted to prove to yourself you're going to get fired every job and that you're meant to be an entrepreneur on your own somehow.
That's right. And so then I found a lane within entrepreneurship. I love the way we started the conversation by saying there isn't just one path, right? I found a lane within entrepreneurship that fit my skill set, what I wanted to be in terms of my identity, and also, something that I feel was closer to my purpose.
So what companies do you buy? Like what sector?
So I buy across a whole heap, but I look for the roll-up strategy, right? So I look to bring businesses together. So at the moment we're looking at things like landscaping businesses, security businesses, and cleaning businesses that sort of thing. They're already selling into, let's say, gated housing communities, right? So how can we make that a synergistic play? And then, we might buy those, as you said, for 3 or 4 times EBITDA, but then we know we can sell them as a group when the profit is up for, anywhere from sort of 8 times upwards. So that's
such a low risk way to do entrepreneurship. I love it because people need security more than ever. Like, the technology is evolving, so you have to make sure the companies you buy are up with the technology, but assume they are. They're very much mom and pop when they start off. So it's like in London, there might be one thing, and in St. Louis, Missouri, there might be another company, and so on. So you could buy them up geographically. You combine them into one brand and one umbrella, and now you have 1 million customers. So investors give you a higher EBITDA multiple because you're big enough to be on the stock market and so on.
Yep.
So not only are you growing, when you buy them, you get synergies by when people move, they switch to the same company, or you get better deals on materials because now you're buying for 1 million customers instead of 1,000 customers. So you grow your profits and you grow the multiple. And if one of the businesses go out of business, no big deal because you own 100 of them. So you could have another one come in and just replace the company that fails. And it's just a safe, easy way. If I were a young 21-year-old seeking to go into entrepreneurship, this is the path I would try to take. Now, I wouldn't have money, so how am I going to buy the companies? Well, that's when you identify like 3 or 4 good investments, and then you just here's what you do. I'm going to outline it, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong.
No, I want to hear you say it. Let's go for it.
Here's what I would do if I was 22 years old, and I realized this was a good, safe way to invest. So and let's just keep using laundromats as an example.
Yeah, perfect.
Or security companies. I like security companies, home security. So I would find 3 or 4 companies out there where their owners were ready to sell. Maybe they're getting older, maybe they got a divorce, maybe they're sick, whatever. Or maybe they just want to sell. And I would try to buy them for 2 times EBITDA. I would get a signed letter of intent where if I come up with the money within 90 days, I could buy them and they can't sell to anyone else. And now I have a real asset. So without any money, I have, let's say, 3 LOIs. Those are real assets. It means I'm contractually, the other people are contractually obligated to sell to me within 90 days if I come up with the money. So now I go to investors. I have this asset, these 3 LOIs.
Yep.
You're selling for 2 times EBITDA. Industry average is 3 times EBITDA. But if I combine these 3, it's 4 times EBITDA. So you double your money the day this closes. And I'm going to buy more and get up to like 10 times EBITDA. And here's ways I'm going to grow the earnings. If you pitch enough investors, some of them are going to say yes. And boom, you're in business.
Do you want to come teach in my mastermind?
Sure.
You have just everything you just said is what I do. Exactly that, right? So for me, right, because you go out there's a lot of money. Private equity, we probably didn't go deep enough into it. You've got family offices, you've got individual people. It's kind of a broad church for just where you've got private investment. So there's a lot of people out there who want to put their money into something that makes more sense. And for me, like, going and buying businesses off people retiring, and you would have seen the stats. It's all over the place. How many, the baby boomer transition, right? All these good profitable businesses that are getting closed down, and they are getting closed down because I see it every day. There's a bit here where you're actually helping as well, right? You can make wealth from it, but you can also kind of, make these businesses that potentially going to get closed down have another lifeline. So there is
70% of businesses just shut down.
Yeah. There's no succession
even
plan.
if they're profitable.
No, exactly. And you go to these people, and I speak to these people daily, right? People in their 60s or 70s, and sometimes they have got traumatic things going on. And you say, what's the plan? And they say, well, listen, my kids are off doing other things. My grandkids want to be YouTube stars. I've got nowhere to put this business. I want to make sure Doris, who's been in the business for 20 years, running accounts, has a job. And I just want to make sure that my legacy is protected. And, you can get these businesses, as you said, 2, 3, 4 times EBITDA. That's a good piece, and you can pay for them, what's called leverage buyouts. I'm sure you know all about this. Seller finance, where you pay the businesses off over time from the profits of the company. And then any differential in that, you can either put your own cash in if you've got it, or just go get an investor who's going to back you to run that business and do it. So,
Well, and you just added a key component to any kind of class on this, which is seller financing is a big part of this. You could say to them, look, I'll pay you 2 times EBITDA, or I'll pay you 3.5 times EBITDA, but over time. And they'll of course say yes, because it's a higher number. And like you said, as you're increasing the profits, you're just paying them out of your profits. So it costs you zero. Like you could basically buy, this almost sounds like a cliche commercial. You could buy a business with nothing, with $0. But that's how it works. And these are real world situations. And the flip side is they just shut down the business, which again, that's how most businesses end. Not the sexy businesses like the tech companies, but a laundromat or a home security company or whatever.
Exactly. And, what I will say is in those years of private equity, I did 117 acquisitions and 25 exits, right?
Wow.
Every single one of those acquisitions, every single one was a leverage buyout. None of it was like, I'm going to turn up, James, you've got a great business. Here's all your money on day one. It was always leveraged in some way with debt, or I was going to pay you over time, or an earn out or something, right? So this sort of stuff that we're talking about here isn't just for the big guys. It's absolutely what happens, all over the place.
And now look at like cryptocurrency. Like I'm not going to go into like, oh, Bitcoin is the future or whatever.
Oh, your mic's gone there, James. You there? I think you might have pulled the cord. Can you hear me okay? Here we go. Right. That's all right. We're getting excited here about leverage buyouts.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. So now I forgot what I was saying, but
no, you were going into crypto. We're just going to jump into crypto.
Yeah. So crypto adds a whole new level of business models with, you can not only do leverage buyout, but you can tokenize part of the business. So I can, create a tradable token, which represents partial ownership in a business, or the future cash flows of business, not even the business itself. But if you buy one of these tokens, maybe it accesses you to part of 10% of the future cash flows of the business for the next 10 years. So that's a new kind of financing that's
an area that I haven't model. That's fascinating, because that's an area that I've looked at, but because I'm really conservative sometimes, I only like to bet on things that I can understand. It's just how I am, right? But I've looked at NFTs. I still don't quite understand it.
I think that's an inning zero. I have not seen a business model yet doing this with crypto, but it will happen. Yeah. Because do you know what the Bowie bonds are?
Yeah, I've heard it. Again, I've touched I haven't gone deep on anything, but I know broadly what most of it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So roughly like 20 years ago, David Bowie needed some cash, as sometimes people do. So he sold off 10 years of the future royalties of his main albums. He didn't sell it off. He borrowed against the future royalties of his albums. Nobody had ever done this before. And so that's why they're called the Bowie bonds. He borrowed $700 million, and your interest would come from, you would get the full 700 million back in 10 years, but the interest was based on a percentage of his future royalties. Well, David Bowie did great over the next few years. The people who bought these bonds made a huge interest rate, and it was very successful. And so the same thing's going to happen with crypto, except it's going to be not structured as bonds, but structured as currencies made off of, backed by the future cash flows of a business or a house or your job or whatever. Like, let's say I'm a graduating college student and I have a huge amount of student loan debt. Well, this is a problem. Student loan debt is trillions of dollars now. Students can't pay it back. Well, what if I tokenize 10% of my future earnings? So I will sell off 10% of my next 10 years of earnings. Now people could judge based on my background and where I went to school and what sort of interests I have, what my future earnings will be. And they can make a bet. Oh, do they think it's worth this or do they think it's worth that? And they'll pay what they think it's worth.
How does that, I mean, how does that, I don't want to go into too many tangent topics here, even though I'm loving this conversation. How does that work with like sort of the whole hedge fund play anyway? Because I mean, you're effectively hedging against an expected outcome, yeah?
Yeah. So okay, let's say you know, I know that you like to buy these businesses, and I say, look, I will give you X amount of dollars for 10% of the profits you make from all of your activities. I know you're going to be actively doing this for 10 years. I will pay X amount of dollars for X% of your future earnings from these things. So I'm not an investor in a fund. I'm not lending you the money. I'm just getting 10% of your cash flows from your investments over the next 10 years. And it might replace the hedge fund business. It might replace the private equity business. It might replace the bond lending business. And then let's say someone else invested in another guy. Because it's a currency, I could trade now. Oh, I've got this guy, Nick. I'm going to trade it for this guy, James, some of his tokens. So I'm diversified. So it's going to be a whole new asset class.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, no,
I'm predicting this. This hasn't happened yet.
No. But I think you're right though, and it's kind of like you're starting to see elements of this happen now. You know, you're starting to see that sort of thing because you know when what was it, BitClout started to play around, you know, and people were getting invested in, you know, that was.
I should look at that site. I suppose people keep telling me to look at that site. I don't know if it's doing well or not.
Yeah, I haven't been on there for a while. It came off the back of a lot of people talking about it on Clubhouse and things like that, and then everyone started going on there putting crazy money in and. Again, it started to get like a bit silly for me. So, so I just went back to buying businesses. I thought, you know, I'm just going to do that.
Well, I think what you're doing is the best way for someone to enter into entrepreneurship, you know, and then later on, if you have like a brilliant idea, start your own company, whatever. But this is a good, solid way. By the way, you could use this for real estate investing, the exact same technique, or you could use it for, I don't know, any industry. It's great. If it's a good, so you either find a problem that nobody has solved, and that's a great business to build, but it's very difficult to know what problems haven't been solved. It's much more difficult than people think. So our example is the wrap concept, that device. But the other thing is you could piggyback off of a problem that you know everybody needs solved, like cleaning your laundry or home security. That's a problem for 100 years. Everyone's been using home security companies to solve this problem. So you're piggybacking off of somebody else creating the demand for that.
I went as far as saying, James, that, and this is probably a little bit too simplistic, but I like simplistic, right? I said there's two types of entrepreneurs, right? There's the entrepreneur, you know, and again, we can kind of go into dimensions, but there's the entrepreneur who likes to create something, right? And there's the entrepreneur who likes to fix up something that has been created and take it to the next stage, right? So they're both entrepreneurs. It's different. I used to say when I was the kid and I got my Lego, right? When I was younger, I would get out the instructions and I'd build the thing to a level of precision, right? I couldn't turn it into anything other than what the instructions said, right? But then there's the other type, my brother or whatever, who would get it and he'd make this masterpiece out of all the different colorful things. You know what I'm saying? And so
that's a great analogy. And you know what? I'm going to write that. You mind if I take some notes?
Oh yeah. It's just, I put a lot of thought into this because I remember this is where I went for my sort of, when I was trying to start businesses and they didn't work, I thought, why isn't it working? Because I wasn't the guy, and this is probably again that I could see the problem in the absolute clarity, and I didn't have the energy to then go after that. I wasn't driven by that. What I was driven by was taking something and going, you know what, I can fix that. I can optimize it. I can make it. I can take it to the next stage, and that's when I described beforehand about where you find your lane.
Yeah, I like that a lot, and I think within that, of course, like you said, there's. Simplicity is good, by the way. So it's good that you gave a simplistic description, but obviously there's categories within categories. So there's the optimizer, there's the innovator, there's the roll-upper, and they're all overlap. But and there's a few more categories too. But
I'm sure you could take this you could turn this into a really good book, whereas I could probably just do it. I could do it as a PDF.
Right. There's the deal maker. Because sometimes a good entrepreneur is simply just really great at doing deals.
Yeah, I agree.
So like, as opposed to me paying cash for a laundromat, there's the guy who does the leverage buyout and then seller financing and,
well, the person in the middle
company real quickly,
the person in the flow of the money, the person who kind of, sits in there and takes a piece of it, but actually doesn't do any of it. That's a skill in its own right.
Yeah. And then, there's the person who knows where money is. Like there's the good fundraiser So
Yeah,
like money flows, and putting yourself in the flow is key to entrepreneurship. So,
I agree.
and understanding where the velocity of money is. So that's a more economic kind of entrepreneur. But
There is a book here. I tell you, there's a really good book here,
yeah.
or definitely a podcast episode or a keynote.
By the way, this is interesting because this is why like often academics think that they could be very good entrepreneurs because they're very smart, but because they don't understand business, they often turn out to be very poor entrepreneurs. And you hardly ever see a professor become a Forbes 100, CEO.
No,
But not that they
it's
can't,
rare.
because they are very smart, but it's very difficult.
Yeah, you've got to. I mean, this is what I experienced from, like, as I said, I was around the guys who had the great business school credentials, but sometimes you've just got to be in the game to see how it's played, right? And it's the feelings that you get as well as what you experience that makes the difference in terms of what you decide to do.
Well,
Um,
that's a very interesting concept too, because like I could read a book about tennis and see how all the great, let's say it's a book just interviewing every great tennis player about their serve, and I could read it all, and I can watch videos, and I could say, well, I'm going to be great at serving. But then you get out into the tennis court, and you're back at day one. Like you have to now do it. Now you might know some things that other people don't know. Your knowledge and depth of understanding of the serve might be great, but you can't do it until you do it.
no, I agree. I fundamentally agree with that. And there's a piece where, like, I mean, we didn't touch on any of your books, but I'm going to mention them anyway. But I know that your latest one, Skip the Line, and we probably need a whole nother conversation to go into this. You are challenging the whole idea of the 10,000 hours rule as well within this. But for me, like, you've got to experience and you've got to put some practice in. I mean, if I think about what I did at the very beginning of my career in this space, right, and some of the decisions I made, they were all interesting things that got me to where I've got to and what I do now. However, it was those hours and hours and hours of being in the trenches that gave me different perspectives.
Well, 117 acquisitions and 25 exits, that is a huge amount of expertise and knowledge. And you have a repertoire of techniques. And I don't know if you think about it in terms of repertoire, but
Interesting.
repertoire is like your tool chest of skill. Like given a certain pattern, you know what to do. Like you have a tool that fits that pattern. And CEO just died, or the CEO stole some money, or the CEO is growing huge but doesn't know how to exit. You recognize these patterns, you've seen them before, and you have a tool to deal with them, as opposed to making it up, which making something up takes energy, takes time, takes massive amounts of physical energy and mental energy and emotional energy.
Stress
So
as
if you,
well.
yeah, and stress. So if you already have the tools in your toolkit to deal with that, that's insanely valuable. And most people don't have that.
I like the word repertoire. I might use that.
Yeah. I think about it in the context of chess. Like what's your opening repertoire? What are the first set of
Yeah.
moves you use? But it's useful for the word repertoire. I think of in a lot of different situations.
So listen, this has been fun, right? You know what? What I said in the beginning, I wasn't mucking around, but I said it's hard to sort of say, if I'm going to describe who James Altucher is, it's hard to do it because you do lots of different things, man. Right? So,
Yeah.
and I think we gave a really nice snapshot of that today, just by where the conversation went. I had a great time, man. Actually,
Yeah, me
better than
too.
I
Thanks so
expected,
much.
and I knew it was going to be fun. What's one question for you? What's next on the agenda for James Altucher? What are you working on?
Well, uh, unfortunately, too many things.
I knew that would
Um,
be the answer. That's why I could
and I
have
say
said, "What's the
unfortunately
one
because
thing?"
well, there's several one things. Do you mind if I say a few of them?
No, please
I
do.
mean, I'm
Please
not
do.
trying to promote them because
No, no, listen, I'm just curious. I mean, I think people have got a good understanding of the fact that you kind of get involved in a lot of stuff. So I'm just curious by asking the question.
yeah. So I am working on developing a company. It's been a year and a half in the making. I thought it would be quick development, but it turns out to be a really difficult problem. And so we're using Zoom right now to broadcast this podcast. But Zoom, if you took this video and put it on YouTube, it's too low quality for YouTube to promote it.
Yeah.
And there's other problems with Zoom as well, which I won't get into right now. But I'm creating a Zoom beater that at the very least will have superior technology, and I'm adding some social media features. So it's going to have we could, for instance, I could have announced we're doing this podcast live, and we could have had a whole audience watching and asking questions if you would allowed, and so on.
Yeah,
So,
well,
and there's other
I
features
definitely
as
need
well.
that.
Like,
I mean, I could
yeah,
say
no,
I need that capability for the stuff I'm doing with my stuff. So there you go. You've got to.
well, and also Zoom doesn't record the audio on both sides. Some competitors do, but they're missing other things. But the audio quality is spotty with Zoom, and so I'm working on that. I'm also working on uh, another thing, which uh, I always tell people write down 10 ideas a day. And people say to me, to improve your exercise your creativity. And people ask me, do you keep track of your ideas? And I say no, because the whole point is just exercise. Like if I'm
Right.
weightlifting, I don't keep track of like, oh, I had 10 really good weight lifts the other day, so I don't have to do it anymore. Like it's just exercise. But enough people have asked me over the past 20 years, is there a software to keep track of your ideas? And I'm like, no, no, I don't want to do that. But now I do want to do it, and enough people have asked, so I'm creating that. But then there's a social media aspect, which is I can search other people's ideas. I could add to other people's ideas. I could follow people's ideas, and there's a little bit of competitiveness in it. Or I could challenge people to come up with ideas for me, and they could benefit somehow if I accept the challenge, if they do well in the challenge. So I'm working on some software for that, and that's already done. I'm going to release that any day.
Oh, great.
And actually November 1st, I'm expecting to release the Zoom competitor, or shortly after that. And uh, I've also been playing a lot of chess. So I'm trying. I started being a chess master back in 1997 when I was in my 20s, and I want to get that good again or better, but it's a different world. And so I've loved the game since I was a kid, and so I spent some time with that. I just came back from my first tournament in 24 years, and I played okay, but not great, like much worse than I thought. And
Did you
so
did you
that
did you do okay though? Considering, I mean,
no, I did much worse than I thought. But it's and I'm good fast player. It's called a blitz player. I'm a good blitz player, but this is the first time I played long games in 24 years. Like two or three of my games lasted over 5 hours, and so I
wow.
realized, oh, this is a different way of thinking than I'm used to. And the kids now are machines. Like they use computers to train, which they weren't computers better than us back then. And so it's just a different culture, a different environment, and I have to even and also I'm older, so my calculating is not as good, my memory is not as good. So it's a fascinating experience to relearn something learned once before, but in a new way, in a new culture, with new techniques, and it's something I've loved since I was a kid. So I always want to exceed at it. So it was disappointing, but fascinating. And and I was telling my wife later. Um, she said to me, I was a little sad about after one of the losses where I felt I should have won. And I called her up and I was a little upset. And she said, think of it as the arc of the hero. The hero is always reluctant in the beginning. You were going into this thinking it was the end of the story and you were the hero already, but you had not been the reluctant hero yet on this journey. So now you're entering the
Nice.
arc of the hero. And I said, okay, yeah, I would have preferred being the hero in the beginning, but just wasn't true.
To give
And
you just some quick inspiration, like, so I said I still play basketball, right? And I used to be pretty good when I was younger, and I play with all these guys. I'm 47. I play with these guys who are like 25, and when I started playing back again, I was terrible, right? And I thought I was going to be good because I used to be good, but then after sort of losing a little bit of weight, training, I ended up going to it was the semi-final, not the grand final, when I scored 27 points, and we won that game, and then we ended up winning.
wow, that's
So there's a
huge.
bit of inspiration of, like, probably to exactly what your wife was describing.
How long did it take you from the point you started training again and the point where you got the 27 points in a game?
It was under a year, but about 9 months. But I got quite intentional about it. I thought, you know what, I'm going to try. I'm going to see, as a 47-year-old guy, where I can't play how I used to play. I can't, I never used to be able to jump, but I can shoot. So I'm going to work on my shooting. I'm going to work on the things that I can do now with a few limitations to my physicality. And yeah, that's how it worked. So there you go.
Yeah, right. You have to work with your new limitations, and what you've gained is you gain wisdom, hopefully, and experience and knowledge. And now after this first tournament, people always say you learn the most from your losses. And so I have a trainer, and he's been dying for me to play in a tournament. He says, "Trust me, it's a different experience, and you have to the only way to really improve is to analyze your games in depth, and then do it with me or whatever, and you learn more from your losses." So I now I have a treasure trove of losses and games to analyze.
I wish you all the best on the journey. I'm sure you'll get back to something that's acceptable to you.
Yeah.
Even if that means you get to the grand final against some guy who's like been, his brain's got a chip in it because, whatever else.
And the other thing I'm doing is I'm writing I've done this before. I have some experience doing this, and I've worked on TV shows before. But I'm writing a screenplay. I had an idea for a
Oh, cool.
screenplay about a corrupt podcaster. I'll leave it at that.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, I think that's the next journey for podcasting, isn't it?
Yes, it could be.
Oh man. Well, listen, this has been so much fun, James. So if people want to reach out to you, I've got jamesaltucher.com is your website.
Yeah, just altucher@gmail.com. I don't even go to jamesaltucher.com. So just altucher at Gmail.
Oh, perfect. Okay. And as I said, you've got about 25 books. You've got a great podcast. So if people want to kind of explore more about you, they can kind of go and
Yeah, just
Google James.
I'm big on Google Earth. If you can find me on
Okay.
Google Earth, I'll be very impressed.
Okay. You should put a prize up for that. There's a
Yeah,
game in there somewhere.
it's funny.
Okay. Listen, mate, it's been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Nick. I really
immensely.
appreciate it.
Yeah, excellent. Have a great day, buddy. See ya.
You too.